ow, bad elbow. Okay. Welcome to the Weights and Plates podcast. I am Robert Santana. I am your host, along with Trent Jones, my co-host.
Yo, what's up?
What's going on, man?
Are you just tweaking your elbow over there? I heard a yelp of pain earlier.
Yeah, I got elbow bursitis that I've been dealing with for the last couple of weeks, and it's almost gone, but, you know, I still got a little bit of a bubble there in that last little pocket that needs to settle down.
To pop it out?
It's all shit. Go ahead.
Can you do it like those old, what's the old solution for like cysts? You know, you just like slam it with a book.
No idea, man. I wish it was that simple. That's a Will Morris question.
Well, you know, I'm reminded that you are turning 40 soon.
Yeah.
My understanding is that's what starts to happen, my friend.
Yeah, I guess, you know, I'm no longer an adult now. I'm a middle-aged adult. I guess I'd start at 35, though, you know?
Masters. We like to say masters, right?
I mean, I've been a master in Olympic weightlifting since I was 35.
Hey, that's true. That's true. Yeah. I mean, have you ever realized at some point, like almost all professional athletes are younger than you now?
Yeah, don't remind me.
I mean, like, you know, I guess there's some sports where, you know, like, okay, golf, right? Yeah, fine. But, you know, football, ain't too many 35-year-olds out there, much less 40-year-olds. Tom Brady's done. So, you know, that old-ass kicker that made it to 50, I forgot his name, Morton or whatever. Yeah, he's gone. So, yeah, that means that just about everybody in the NFL is younger than you. NBA, probably, I would guess. I don't know. I don't know much about basketball.
Probably. I mean, jumping and landing and producing high force outputs at a very rapid rate is not something that you can continue doing for very long, you know?
Right. Yeah. Have you seen Magic walking around? Man, that guy he's trashed. Yeah, he's torn up. Well, yeah, I don't know. It just dawned on me at some point that I was like, oh, shit. Like, I guess I think this is a male thing, I think, where you're just in the back of your head, you're like, you know, I bet I could go. You know, I get it. I couldn't be a pro, right? I couldn't like be a pro and play a whole season and all that kind of things. But I think every guy in the back of his head has some sort of like sense that, like, you know, I bet I could hang like in the right circumstances, you know, on the field.
You know, it's kind of funny, and this is why they should test vertical jump at a young age so they can get it through these fuckers' heads that, hey, you're just a shitty athlete, bro.
It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
You can work hard and have fun and improve your own delta, but your ceiling is much lower than the guys doing this for a living, you know?
Yeah. Well, but that doesn't sell, you know, you can dunk a basketball programs.
No, or you could, you know, gain 50 pounds of muscle in 6 months or 3 months, you know?
You can take your 40 from, you know, a 5'2" to a 4'6".
You know, you could be a size 0 if you're a woman, you know?
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't sell those programs very well.
I'm sorry, people. There are, you know, limits that are very different for all of us, you know? And accepting those is important. And, you know, we you know, the thing is, growing up, you pretty much know that if you're under 6 foot, you're probably not going to be competitive for basketball, you know?
Right.
You know, and that's acceptable. And then even if you're pretty good at it, you know, and you've been playing it, you know, if you don't make it to college basketball, you pretty much know that, you know, you're not at that caliber probably, you know. I wouldn't know, you know, I wasn't good at those types of sports. I was okay, you know, but not good enough to want to play or try out, you know. But, you know, I have a 24-inch vertical jump, so I'm slightly above average, you know. And, you know, I'm slightly above average, and it's allowed me to do some it's allowed me to make decent results in the weight room. You know, I swam decent times. I could play sports. I wasn't great at them. You know, I'm under 6 foot, so it's a long way up to dunk, you know?
Yeah.
So that never happened. But you know, if I practice free throws, I can make them reliably. But I just knew, you know, I'm like, I'm not going to be an awesome basketball player, you know? And that's not me being self-deprecating or having low confidence or any of these other things. I'm not limited by hard work. I'm limited by my arm length, my leg length, my type 2 muscle fiber distribution, you know, my VO2 max even, you know, my connective tissues ability to, you know, handle jumping and landing. Like, there's lots of things that, you know, I was just born with that aren't favorable to those types of activities, you know?
Yeah.
And we used to celebrate freak athletes, you know, like Michael Jordan. He was awesome. Nobody thought that you can replicate that, you know, but somehow along the way, this whole hard work is the only limiting factor in your life kind of dominated society, you know, in the 90s especially. And everybody thinks if I just did that extra thing or if I worked a little bit harder, you know, I would have been elite. And it's like, no, you would have been less average probably, you know?
Yeah, right.
And
exactly.
that's not a knock. That's an observation of reality, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's funny how basketball was the sport that nobody, like, if you weren't tall and you didn't have long arms and you couldn't jump like Spud Webb or whatever, then it was just accepted that, I'm not going to be good at basketball. But like at the same time, we would turn around and be like, but if I just like trained even harder, I could play college football. At least that was the way. I know I'm not alone in that thinking. That's the way my high school brain thought. But no, I think there's just this conceit that all males, I think all males should have. I won't say that all males do have, but I think there's this conceit that, you know, you're like, but I could compete in some way against these guys at you know the college level, maybe even pro level. Like, you know, I could get in like an offensive drive and do some damage. Of course, it's completely untrue. Like, I would get absolutely destroyed in any of those sports, any professional sport you want to pick. Of course, but there's this like thing in the back of the male brain that just believes. But then at some point you get old enough and you realize, it dawns on you, like, oh shit, I'm older than all those guys now.
Well, you know, they say when people behave crazy, there's, you know, a few different reasons for it, and one of them is bad information, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And that was me. I just had bad information, you know, especially in fitness. You know, the information was that hard work was the only limiting factor, you know?
Right.
The genetics were glossed over, steroids were glossed over. And, you know, that applies to a lot of things. You know, remember Back to the Future? If you put your mind to it, you can accomplish anything, you know? You know, that's kind of a broad oversimplification of, you know, if you work harder, you can move the delta, you know, for some things more than others. And, you know, hard work is always a limiting factor to everything you do. You know, you can be really awesome at something, but not be, you know, at the top of that. You know, like there are a lot of shitty basketball players who have 40-inch vertical jumps, but they're on the NBA getting, you know, $1 million contracts and just warming the bench or not winning, you know, or performing poorly compared to other freak athletes, you know, but now you're at the point where it's the top, you know, 1% versus the top 1%. And hard work starts to matter more there. But, you know, you're not going to take someone who's built to produce average results and produce elite results, you know, or somebody below average to produce above average results, you know, maybe sometimes that happens, you know, but elite, like you're born that way, you know, and anybody who's been in a sport has seen the guy who intentionally slacks because he just doesn't give a fuck and he knows he's going to improve. And year after year, he gets better and he's barely working hard. You know, we've seen that, you know, and that gets you through the high school level. I can't speak to the college level. I didn't play college sports, but in the high school level, you got puberty on your side and you got, you know, just the time effect, you know, they're getting taller, they're getting older, and they're spending more time on the field or in my case in the water, right? And there's just an improvement that happens in spite of what they're doing, you know, and this could continue further down, you know. We've certainly seen it in the weight room. We have guys that are pretty damn strong and have gotten there just completely fucking off, you know.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I knew guys who squatted over 500 fucking around in the gym, you know. Rip himself, he doesn't consider himself a strong lifter. And compared to power lifters, he's not, you know, 220 squatting 622 in a single ply. You know, when the top guys were squatting 1,000, that's not impressive to, you know, you and I, that is. But he got to 400 on his own, just fucking off, you know. And it's described in Bill Starr's book. And then Starr talks about how Rip followed some multivitamin megadose regimen and went from 400 to 500 in 3 months. So, you know, Carl Ragavan and I confronted Rip about this and we're like, so what were you taking? He's like, I know you guys think I was taking a bunch of drugs, but the truth is I could not afford them. And then I'm like, so then what the fuck? How'd you go from 400? So I said, what the fuck? You went from 400 to 500 in 3 months then? He's like, oh yeah, that was true. And then I'm like, well, what'd you do? He's like, novice effect. He's like, I went to the Y and actually trained with people. I couldn't tell you what the fuck I did, you know?
That's amazing.
But basically he probably followed some form of structured progressive overload after, you know, jerking off on his own at some other gym, wherever he was at, you know? And to me, it was like, shit, 400, that's a lot to me, you know, but not really. Rip's built thicker than I am, you know, and has a bigger structure than I do. So it's no surprise that he got himself to 400. Shorter, just fucking, I got to 315 fucking around, you know? So there's guys that go higher, you know. Rip has a below average vertical jump. I don't know what it is. I think he said 12 once in the podcast. Mine's 24, you know. Now, you know, add 10 inches to that. You got guys that, you know, have a baseline squat of 400, you know, and then they start training and they get to 6, you know, like.
Yeah.
So,
I think what's interesting here is we're talking about this myth that certainly, you know, I wasn't around in the 80s and before, so I can't really say, but certainly, yeah, it was very prevalent in the 90s about if you work hard, you can achieve anything. Anything you want to be, you just have to work hard enough and you'll get there. And this myth that life is a meritocracy, and it doesn't take much time in the adult world, in the real world, quote unquote, to realize that that's completely untrue. It's completely untrue. The world is not a meritocracy, right? You know, working harder does not make you, like, I know a lot of guys that work super fucking hard, put in a lot of hours. They don't make much money. You can look at guys that do construction and see that. Then there's other guys who do similar jobs, work a lot less hours, and they make a ton of money. There's guys who sit in an office and, for all intents and purposes, do basically nothing. You know, they shuffle papers and information from one point to another point with no like tangible work product. And they pull down a couple $100,000 a year. And how do you get those jobs? You got to know the right people, got to be in the right place, you got to have the right name on your, you know, under the school name, on your resume, whatever it is. You have to have the right connections. And that's relevant to what we wanted to talk about today. We wanted to talk about burnout. Burnout in training, of course, because that's what our show's about. But, you know, we're talking about burnout in life in general too. And I think that that's part of the reason why a lot of people say that they're burnt out or, you know, have been burnt out for a while is if you grow up with this narrative that life is meritocracy and that if you just keep working harder, like the reason you haven't achieved what you want is because you're not working hard enough. You just got to work even harder. You thought you were working hard. No, asshole, work harder. You know, David Goggins already, you know, he was up at 3:30. When did you get up this morning? Right? There's all sorts of shit like that.
I hate that one.
Right? You know?
And losers do wake up after 5, though. I'm being a loser right now.
Right. So, but you know, but that's the thing, right? This is a very popular rhetoric.
Coffees for closers only.
Yeah, coffees for closers. Do you want the Lincoln? The steak knife set, or did you get fired?
No, Cadillac. First prize, Cadillac Eldorado. Second prize, set of steak knives. Third prize is you're fired.
You're fired, right? That's a great movie. But this is, you know,
dude. What did he say? This is a good point. I love this movie. So we're talking about Glenn Ross. If you haven't seen it, you know, go rent it. It's got a A-list cast. And it's fantastic. All of them took pay cuts to make this movie. Anyways, there's a scene and this, you know, they bring this guy down from corporate to yell at the salesmen that are all underperforming, blah, blah, blah. Right. And then you hear from both perspectives, the salesmen are bitching, making excuses for why they're not meeting the quotas they make. And then the management saying they're just not working hard enough and they're all a bunch of fuck ups. Essentially, they bring this guy in to basically shit all over them. And, in his big, you know, his big rant, you know, some of the things we just cited right now some of the things we just quoted right now came out of his mouth. But one of the things I remember is he's just like, what did he say? He's like, with the materials you have right now, I can make $15,000 tonight on tonight's sit, you know? And this was back in 1990. So like what, 15 grand is probably like what, 30 now or 40
at least.
Yeah. You know, but, the point is like, the assumption behind a statement like that, you know, I like being I like people talking shit to me like that. That's productive for me, but I recognize that there's a small percentage of people that are receptive to that. Like Rip says shit, not exactly like that, but Rip's a shit talker, you know? We've heard him on the podcast, and you know, I'm receptive to that style, but I learned early on I can't dish out that style to a lot of people, you know?
Right.
But anyhow, the assumption behind that, we're going to deconstruct that, is that all of those guys are capable of what he's capable of. And to an extent, that's correct, but to another extent, that's incorrect, you know? It's the whole way you look at things, right? It varies from one person to the next.
Right.
Style is going to vary from one person to the next. And some skills just don't connect with some personality. Some people should not be salesmen, just like some people should not fix your car, and some people should not do surgery, you know? Some skills are more basic than others. I think, you know, a certain level of salesmanship is probably attainable for most people because it's, you know, a survival skill, you know, so we could probably figure it out to the point where we can get by, you know?
Right.
But then you start getting into more complex skills like, you know, playing basketball at the elite level in the NBA, or, you know, football, pick your sport, right? Or heart surgery, you know, you're going to have fewer and fewer people capable of doing those things, you know? But the idea that the issue I see is that anytime anything goes wrong, it's always because you're not working hard enough, you know?
Right.
And you know, I'm not going to, this is not a hall pass to slack off people. You need to work as hard as you possibly fucking can. Or if the thing that if you can't do that, then you need to stop doing the thing that you're doing because it's clearly not worth it to you. You know, like you also have an economy of effort too. There's only so much effort you can put into so many things, and you got to just let things roll off your plate in order to hone in on the things that legitimately matter to you. And only you can decide that, right? You're going to spend 20 years trying to get a 400 squat, a 500 squat, a 600 squat. And then in that 20 years, you only actually work hard 30% of the time because of the other things are more important, you know, like.
Yeah, so, I think that's what I wanted to hit on, right? Is that I think the reason why, well, because a lot, look, you know, we don't need a study to tell us. A lot of people claim burnout right now, and they have for a long time, right? They're like, oh, I'm burned out. A lot of people would say, yes, I feel burned out. And I think the reason why is that we have this rhetoric, right? Which at least you and I, we grew up with, like in sports, it was, you're not working hard enough. You just got to work harder and you'll get where you want to go. And then same thing, when you get the job, you know, well, when you go to college, right? If you don't have the grades you want, you got to work harder. It's just all work. And then same thing, you didn't get the job you want, or you want a better job, you want to make more money, you just got to work harder. And the thing is, like, all that energy that you're putting into it, like, where is it aimed? And I think that for a lot of people, their job, where they feel burned out, is not in alignment with their values and their desires, right? The job is a means to an end. Right. I think for the guy in Glenn Ross, I forget what his character's name is.
Which actor?
The Baldwin. The guy from.
They never say his name in the movie, but he's credited as Blake.
Okay. Well, so for that guy, I think the job is what he wants in life. You know, that job. And I've met people like this, and they tend to be in sales. It's pretty accurate. But like money to them, like the amount of money they make, the amount of sales they do, it's a scorecard for them. And their goal in life is to win. They want to win. They want to beat everyone else. And money is a way of keeping score. I don't even know that they care about the money that much. It's just a proxy for, you know, it's a score on a board, right? And they need to be the winners. Okay, fine. But I think a lot of people aren't like that. And, you know, but we have a work culture in particular that, you know, treats everyone as if they're, you know, athletes competing on a field, trying to get to the highest level, right? This is the way that corporate America is in, you know, most of the places that I've been in or seen. So, you know, that's the first thing that I wanted to say about burnout is I think that when there's a misalignment between your values and your desires, like what it is that you want, then you're going to get burned out on what you're doing. You're going to get burned out on what you're doing. So let's turn that to training now. Right. So I think that, you know, I think that if you look at people who get into our world of strength training and they get more than a couple years down the road, you start to see kind of a split, right? You see the people who are lifers, so to speak, like you and I, right? That just keep doing it. We love it. And we just keep training, man. We just keep climbing up that hill, and, you know, the rock rolls down on us like Sisyphus, and we just push her back up, and we're happy doing that. And then you see people some of whom get pretty damn strong and they completely drop off the planet. I'm thinking of a guy in Wichita Falls that we both know who got pretty damn strong. And I don't even think I don't think he's touched a barbell in years at this point.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And, he's a nice guy I've talked to him several times, but it's kind of funny. This guy put in a lot of work to build a pretty impressive amount of strength for an average guy. And, I think he squatted 405 for 5, was pulling in the 500s. Not a particularly large guy, he's probably 5'10", 200 pounds, thereabouts.
Yeah, he's a 198er, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, and then he's gone, right? I would guess that at some point he got burned out on the training because being strong and pushing, like adding weight to the bar, is something he actually really didn't want. It was out of alignment with what it is he wanted out of life. So let's dig into that a little bit. Do you see this with people? Do you see this with clients?
Yes, I do see that quite a bit. And typically it's in people that have a subjective goal and that has nothing to do that is indirectly related to getting stronger. Typically it's, I want to look better, or I want to feel better, or I want this to stop hurting. And part of the equation is you have to get stronger, and getting stronger means lifting more weight, right?
Right.
And sometimes they achieve a portion of that goal, usually in the looks category. They start to look a little bit better, but they're not at their end goal. And to get to their end goal, they have to lift so much more weight than they ever thought they'd want to lift. And it eventually gets out of alignment because they have to train like a more advanced, serious lifter. They have to train like a competitor just to get a mediocre result because they started out below average to begin with,
Right,
and that's
right.
And when I say below average, I'm not saying you suck. A lot of people take that average word as sucking,
Right. Yeah. Again, that's that meritocracy kind of culture that we're talking about, where it's like, you have to be the best to be worthwhile.
Look,
you can't be average. Average is bad.
Yeah, and let's define what we mean here, because average, we're talking subjectively. Like if we were to take one of these people that we're thinking about and have them do a vertical jump test, it's going to be probably in the low 20s or lower in some cases, right?
For men.
They're not going to, for men, they're not going to be that explosive, and that's an objective, and then when you put that into a pool of a larger population, they're probably in the middle of the bell curve or slightly below, so it's average or below. Usually when you're above average at something, your baseline is above average. That's something I've noticed. Or you get there very quickly, That's something I've noticed, and people that are really good at stuff see that, like we get guys that are older and they're like, oh, I was never an athlete. And it's like, no, you didn't compete in athletics. This linear progression tells us otherwise,
Right. Yes.
Especially if they LP the power clean,
Yeah. Right.
You get 35-year-old guys that went into something else and never did sports for one reason or another. It's rare that this happens. Usually people fall into things they're good at, but for some reason you get these guys sometimes. They come in and they make phenomenal progress under the bar, but then they can also do the Olympic lifts and get those up as well,
Yeah.
And that tells you all you need to know. You got somebody who's athletic there. But my point is, when you're truly exceptional, when you're elite at something, you get to an above average result pretty quick, or you start out with one.
Right.
We've seen these people, they're not going to have a linear progression that ends with a 275 squat. They're going to have one that ends with the 475 squat. We've seen these people. They're in our circle. I know a couple of guys that got over 500, and not all of them were big, super heavyweights. Some of them were. But even then, I get guys that are in that super heavyweight category, AKA obese, whatever, like high 200 pounds, that finish their LP under 300 pounds. I got a guy right now who's over 300 pounds, and he struggles with squatting over 300 pounds. The athleticism's not there,
Right.
And there's other things, there's other factors there, certainly, but it's not like if he worked a little harder, he'd LP to 500. And that's just not true. If he worked a little harder, I think he'd LP probably into the mid to high threes. Actually, I've got him there before. He got to the high threes, but lifestyle gets in the way. And in order for him to maintain the high threes, he has to, make sacrifices in his lifestyle to do that. In contrast, I know a guy who's in Army Special Forces, has a vertical jump in the high 30s, was a football player, and was very strong. And he was running pretty high mileage. It's 1.20 miles. He claims he wasn't running 20 miles when I trained him. Okay, I don't remember, but he was still having to put in a lot of miles. So he's doing a lot of running, which is counterproductive to this and which injures most people. As long as, get ready to, get really depressed now. As long as he kept his squat under 500 pounds, he could squat volume all day long. So he would squat anywhere from 400 to 500 for sets of 10. Sets of 10 people, and run miles and miles and miles. And I got him up to a 640 deadlift, which was a fake 1RM because he was still squatting in the 400. He would not lower the volume on his squat because he had run. And he's like, I got to run, so I got to keep squatting. I'm not going to squat singles. I'm not doing it. It's going to get me hurt and it's going to fuck up my running. So I got him to deadlift singles. We ran it up to 640. I think with a proper peak, he would have been at 675. But listen to what I said. Forget these absolute numbers because there's people that are unathletic that are strong, for various reasons. But this guy, no drugs, by the way, in case you're wondering. He was drug-free. He just had to maintain a squat in the 400s for sets of 10, by the way.
Right.
He just had to maintain that, and then he can run and not get hurt. If he squatted over 500, if he was doing 500 for 5 or 5, the guy at one point before the military did 530 for 5 sets of 5. If he got over 500 on the squat, I think his hips would hurt, things would hurt, he couldn't run. So he's like, well, I'll just keep the squat in the 400s. That's a natural athlete right there. That is, and there's no hard work there.
Right.
There's no hard work there. When he was working hard at the squat, he squatted 530 for 5 sets of 5. Probably had more in him, but he didn't want to be a power lifter. He was an athlete. He said, I strength trained. He was such a shit talker. He still is. I love him, man. He's a good friend of mine. He's probably listening. I think he listens or he follows some of my stuff because we started talking again. But he says he would tell me, he's like, I strength trained to play real sports, So to get a big giant squat or deadlift was not even within his priorities. He didn't go into this for that, and that's funny because it was out of alignment with his lifestyle. For him to max out the squat, bench, and deadlift, it just didn't make sense for him. He had no interest. He did one Olympic meet and that was it. He's like, fuck this, stupid. That's my point, right? Like, yeah, if you work harder, you'll produce more, but here's the thing. It might not be that much more. I had a guy I was recently training who got the LP addiction where it has to happen on LP and only LP and no other program because I'm a failure if I don't get my 3 sets of 5 up and add 5 pounds 3 times a week. We've all had these guys. You have too, Trent, right? Mm-hmm. And I slowly broke him out of that, but for a while there, it was like, well, if I just stay on it, why'd you reset my bench and put it on Texas method? Because his press crashed and his bench was getting there. And I'm like, okay, you benched, I don't remember, it was like 99 or 100 kilos. So, 217 or 220, right? Right. And he did 3 sets of 5. He finished it, but they were slowing the fuck down. And I'm like, okay, you want to keep this lift on a linear progression. Do you honestly think you're going to bench 242 just by staying on a linear progression? And he actually believed it. And guess what? When we were on Texas method, he had a bad week. He pooped out at 101. So it's like 225, 223,
Yeah, right, right.
So like you see this enough times, you're like, when people start struggling within a range because of lifestyle or whatever, outside of the guy who just started and he's not eating or sleeping enough and, he's pooping out with a 175 squat. I mean, that could vary too, in all fairness, but let's just throw a low number out there for a below average person.
That does not happen. It's rare unless something major is going on.
When you've gotten somebody who's been on a linear progression and he's adding 15 pounds a week to his squat, and he's been doing it for 2 to 3 months, and now recovery has prohibited him from adding the next 5 pounds, okay, we fixed that. Now we're fixing something that might account for 5 to 10% of the problem. And those are just random numbers I'm throwing out there, but a low percentage. Okay, he might add 10, 15 more pounds to a 315 squat, but okay, now he did 330. Congratulations, right? You've just made your life more complicated, which kudos to you if this is that important to you, because I sure as hell did it. I don't regret it, and we'll get to that. I'm coming to a point with this. But you're sacrificing more and expending more energy on something that may not be in alignment with what you're trying to do. In other words, your goals are not compatible with your lifestyle, at this point. Mm-hmm. Somehow they've gotten out of alignment. Now, to that point, I have busted my ass for a very mediocre result, and I'd do it again twice because I love this shit, I like doing this. I enjoy the lifts. It's simple. So I'm checking off a box too, like, okay, I have strength trained and I've gotten enough of a stimulus, and I'm doing that very efficiently because I'm all about efficiency. I care about the outcome. How am I producing a measurable outcome that is efficient, not taking up too much time? It's low maintenance for me. I like doing this, so I've busted my ass to squat in the, high fours probably. And if I can manage to recover, I'll probably squat in the high fours. I've been in the mid fours already officially. I just haven't peaked to see where I'm at now, but I'm probably in the high fours, and that's not impressive. I'm 195 right now. It's not impressive. Even if I got back down, okay, 175, 180, triple body weight squat. Congratulations. There's people that are doing more,
Yeah. Right.
And I don't care because I love it. So you better really love something that you kind of suck at and you want to max your gains out on, because you can max your gains out on anything. You could be a shitty artist and spend a lifetime trying to draw better, even though you suck at drawing,
Right.
But if it brings you joy, then fucking do it, man. We're not saying don't do it, but if it's causing you stress and burnout, interfering with the things that are actually important to you, then reevaluate what you're doing. Don't stop lifting, but lower the threshold, Right. It's okay.
Well,
it's okay. Rip might make fun of you. That's fine too. You'll survive,
Yeah,
He makes fun of me all the time. I'm not 220. I get shit for it all the time.
Right.
I'll probably do it at some point, maybe. I don't know. I'm trying. I don't want to eat that much is the problem now.
Right.
It should have been done 10 years ago when I was motivated enough to, fluff up that much, although he says I won't be that fat. He might be right, but I didn't have good programming. That's another story. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think that's the heart of the matter, is that you have to know what you want in order to align your training with your values, right? It's values, and I think desires come out of your values, right? If you have sort of like things that you believe in, core things that you're like, this is good, I want to do this, not that. This is good, this is bad. So we all have some core beliefs about the world and how we see ourselves in it. And I believe that desires are, they emerge from that. But it's actually pretty hard to figure out what it is that you want, because there's so many things competing for attention, telling us what we want. And there's no difference between the working world and the fitness world in this regard. In the working world, we have, I don't watch TV anymore, and I haven't for a few years now. And so anytime I'm around like people watching TV, which is effectively like cable TV, like live TV or, streaming or whatever, anything that has ads in it, I'm always like, the ads really jump out to me now because I'm not used to them anymore. And like, there's like cars, right? That's like one of the most common ads you see is cars. And these are not inexpensive cars either, right? Like this, the brand new whatever. I mean, shit, like a Civic is probably $50,000 now. I don't even know. But it's a lot, right? These are like $50,000 to $75,000 cars, sometimes more, but these are expensive lifestyle purchases that are being advertised on TV all the time. Why? Because the people who, these advertising executives have figured out that if they blast you with this stuff, that there's a certain amount of people who will start to aspire to buying those cars. And the whole idea is that there's this image of success, this image of pleasure, this image of achievement, of status that is portrayed, and then the item is inserted that is portrayed as the key to those things, right? You want status, you want success, you need to drive an Acura or an Audi or whatever. And it's no different in the fitness world, right? Like, if you want the girls, you got to have abs, because the guy with abs has got 2 girls hanging off his arms, right?
And then, ironically, you go on Instagram when you get to that point. I never got to that point because I don't take a bunch of drugs. But you go on Instagram, and then men are hitting you up.
That's right. Yeah. There's that sweet spot, right? If you look like an underwear model, you get all the girls, right?
Yeah.
And then you model for, like a Hollister or whatever. And then you get a little bit older and your muscles get bigger. Yeah, and it's a bunch of dudes like looking at you now.
I had a girl tell me once, she was trying to help me with social media. And she's like, well, if you're trying to market to women, which I'm clearly not, look at my content, this totally attracts dudes, and that's fine for different reasons. And, not reasons that the bodybuilders attract dudes. I don't get those types of messages. But, we tend to be a mostly male audience because of the stuff we're talking about and the reason we train and all that stuff. And, she told me, she's like, if you're trying to appeal to women, she's like, you have to have women on there because women don't look at pages with other men. I started cracking up.
It's true, man, right? So the thing is, to figure out what you want, it can be difficult, right? But you have to figure out what it is that you want. And I don't think you're going to learn this from the get-go. You're not going to get into barbell training and know exactly what it is you want out of health and fitness. I just don't think that's possible. It's something that comes to you over a period of time. And you got to try stuff and realize it doesn't work for you in order to figure out, to hone in on what it is that you want, what your long-term goals and your reason for doing this, is. Sometimes stuff works for you and then it doesn't work anymore. There was a time where when in my lifting career, if you want to call it that, where I really enjoyed competition. And I signed up I did 1 or 2 meets every year for 3 or 4 years. And that was great. It motivated me. I really enjoyed having something to compete at again, because I hadn't done anything competitive since high school. And I enjoyed that. It was a good outlet for me. I didn't really have many other responsibilities in life. So it was great. And it lit a fire under me for training. It's something to get jacked up about, something to like compare myself against others and see if I could, beat, set little benchmarks for myself and beat them. Great. Okay. It worked. And that was a good goal for me at the time. And then my life changed and I just stopped caring about that. And at this point, I would get burnt out if I signed up for a powerlifting meet every year, because I just don't care about that. For me, I'm into lifting for my health at this point. I want to be strong. I want to be healthy. I want to be resilient. I want to be able to I want to be able to pick up heavy shit out in the yard. I want to be able to take care of, difficult jobs that other people in my community can't do because they're not strong enough. I want to be able to take a hit and be able to get back up and be okay. All those different things. And so being a certain baseline level of strength does that for me. Going beyond that doesn't really get me much additional, functionality. So then there's do I enjoy the process? And I do. I enjoy the process of, like you, adding a little bit of weight to the bar when I can, figuring out little ways, like problem solving along the way, to see if I can add a little bit more without turning my training into, a competitive powerlifters program or a competitive bodybuilders program or whatever. So that's where I fall. And it took me years to get there, to kind of figure out what it is that works for me. And you know what? It might change 5-10 years from now. Strength will always be a part of it, but it's, how and where it fits into the bigger picture will change.
It's funny you say that, because when I first got into barbell training using these methods, I wanted to compete in meets. I was excited about all the gear and all that. And, the not gears and steroids, but like, the shoes, what else did I buy? Shoes, shin guards, about knee sleeves at one point. Don't wear those anymore.
Wrist wraps.
Wrist wraps, don't wear those anymore. Bar grip shirt eventually, but that came much later. Mm-hmm. And trying out different shoes, learning the ropes of all this. And I did meets because I agreed with Dr. Bradford's recommendation at my seminar that you should do a meet to give yourself something to aim for and experience it, And I did, and I hate meets, Yeah. Meets burnt me out so bad. I don't want to do them, but I love attending them. I love bringing other lifters to them. I just don't like being a competitor. And
sure.
That's been the case for a while. Now I have to do one to post a respectable total, because the last total I posted is so fucking low, it just makes me look bad on paper. So I'm pretty much hitting ceiling effects. So, big PRs are unlikely, maybe in the next decade, I, do a master's meet and set some new PRs. But I think whatever I post today is reflective of how strong I am. Even then, they weren't reflective of how strong I was, because all the dieting and, making weight and all that bullshit, I just never performed at top level.
Sure.
But
right.
I didn't like meets. That was out of alignment with me. Mm-hmm. And, I'd hear power lifters talk shit like, if it doesn't happen in a meet, it doesn't count. It only matters if you do it on the platform. Gym lifts don't matter, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, the weight got lifted. Yeah, go fuck yourself, It's total bullshit, like, come on. If
like every meet that I've done, I mean, most of the meets that I've done were in Wichita Falls, which is about 2 hours, give or take, from where I lived at the time in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So it's really not that bad of travel. But it's still, the fact is, I still have to drive out to Wichita Falls. I gotta get a hotel. I got to sleep in a hotel the night before. I got to eat food on the road. You know, even if I bring it with me, it's not my normal thing that I eat at home, right? You got to get up and get warmed up and go to this meet at a different time than I normally train. Like all these different conditions change on the day of, right? And then there's like nerves because it's, you know, you got one chance to get it right, and there's all these people looking at you. And now for me, that I enjoy the spotlight. It doesn't faze me at all. So the psychological part of it was fine. That didn't really bother me that much. But still, it's like it's an unusual environment. So like, you know, I think that affects some people more than others. But yeah, it's not. Yeah, come on. Like, you know, when you're in a gym, that's at least like it's a controlled environment because it's usually the same gym and you're eating the same things and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, like meets are. I get it. They can be a lot of fun. And I certainly enjoy watching other people experience that and having fun at them. But, you know, they're also like, some people just fall apart in a meet, and it's fine. I totally get why you would, you know, or you just underperform based on, you know, compared to how you normally do. But but I think what you're saying in there though is this is definitely a source of burnout for a lot of lifters that I see is getting too focused on numbers. Getting too wrapped up in having to have a certain number in your PR book to be, I guess, like to be worthwhile or to be consider yourself a real lifter or whatever. And you know, there's people out there that are like, you know, well, I can't take anyone seriously that hasn't put 500 pounds on their back and stood up with it. And like, you know, people will say that. I've heard people say that. Particularly about coaches, like, oh, well, I don't trust a guy who hasn't squatted 500. You know, what do they know? Which you like, you know, that's ridiculous, right? Because what were we talking about, right? We're talking about a guy who's, you know, 6'2", 295, or a guy who's 5'5" and, you know, 165. You know, but it's still out there. And I think some people get caught up in this numbers thing where it's like, well, if I don't squat 3 plates, then it's, you know, I suck and I'm worthless. And you know, it's all about getting to that number. And then you get 3 plates and then there's the next number. And if your entire value as a lifter is tied up in the number that you lift on the bar, you're going to burn out because there's always somebody that's going to lift a lot more. I mean, powerlifting has been a sport now for 40 years, give or take, and people are breaking world records like crazy right now. I don't even know if we've even come close to hitting the like genetic peak of the sport.
I don't think so.
Probably not. But that's what's happening right now is we're getting better genetic freaks that are getting into powerlifting and they're squatting, you know, 1,000 pounds, 1,100 pounds. Like,
what we want to see here at my gym is this guy, Andrew. He likes one of my members, good friend of mine. He is a strongman fan. Yeah, what he wants to see is somebody squat and deadlift. Deadlift meaning hands placed outside the legs the way a deadlift is performed, not this other bullshit that they should be disqualifying. Anyhow, we want to see a squat and deadlift of 1,000 that has not been done yet at raw.
Yeah, I think Hafthor is capable of that.
He technically did it, but it was classic raw, so the squat was not 1,000. He had knee wraps.
He had wraps on. Yeah. I don't know if he's going to do it without wraps.
He can't do a Ray Williams with sleeves.
I think he could do it, but I don't think he will at this point. I think he's probably too old to bother about it.
I forgot why he wanted to do that. It was at 2018 he did that meet. I forgot what his goal was. I think he wanted to squat 1,000. I think that's what it was.
At one point, Hafthor was wanted to break the world record total in powerlifting. And I don't know if it was a raw total or raw with wraps total.
I think he could.
And I think he could, except for, well, he made a run at it. This is Hafthor Bjornsson, by the way, the Icelandic strongman. If you don't know who Hafthor is. Anyway, yeah, so he's, you know, incredible strongman, one of the best of all time. And then he's been very interested in powerlifting along the way. And he's continued to compete in powerlifting even after his strongman career. Yeah, and that was a goal he brought back up that he wanted to hit last year, and then he tore his pec real bad on a bench press attempt, and I don't know if he'll ever. I think that's probably beyond him now just because of the bench press. But he has been running up his squat and deadlift lately. He squatted 9 something pretty damn fast last month. And he's pulling 1,000, you know, right now.
Well, and strongman, they use straps. They allow hitching. Can he pull 1,000 with a clean lockout and a competition grip? I don't know.
I don't know about the grip. Yeah, that would be the big one. For him, Hafthor's never been a hitcher. Some of these guys, they can only deadlift with, by hitching, like Rob Kearney, for instance. That dude hitches everything that he can. Whatever. It's in the rules, so you can do it. But yeah, but all those strongmen, they use straps. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, Eddie hitched a little bit, but not bad as the rest.
Right. Yeah, I've never seen Hafthor's never been a hitcher, so I think he could do it, but I don't know if he could hold on to it. I have no idea. I mean, that's so alien to me. Like
he's fucking 6'8". I would hope his hands are big enough.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. But I know that if I deadlift with straps on and I'm pulling in the mid 4s, let's say, then it might take me a little bit of time to go from straps to getting my alternate grip up to speed to where I could do the same thing with an alternate grip. But I'm talking about that's maybe 2 workouts to make that switch if it didn't happen right away. But I have no idea. At 1,000 pounds, if you've trained your deadlift with straps only at that level for years, I have no idea if you can hold on to it. It's a good question.
We're gonna see. Maybe
I guess we'll see. Yeah,
but yeah, I want to see squat and deadlift at 1,000. In raw meat. That'd
be cool. I think the problem is the guys who are capable of that up until maybe recently, they weren't in powerlifting; they were strongmen.
Or in the NFL.
up until recently, I think the guys who were the strongest men in the world were in strongman, not powerlifting.
Right.
And that has probably started to flip, but
Well, the best Olympic weightlifters in the world are in the NFL.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, for sure.
And that's why we suck at Olympic weightlifting. The talent's getting paid real well to do something else.
That's right. But anyway, let's bring it back on the topic. I see that a lot, and I've been caught in that trap too. I'm a coach, and so I compare myself to others sometimes, which I know better, but I still do it. I compare myself to other coaches, and sometimes I think well, shit, I don't squat 500. Who am I to call myself a starting strength coach? The best I've pulled is 500. That's the starting point for a lot of guys. They don't even think about calling themselves strong until they start pulling 500.
Oh, we are so fucked in the head. We are so fucked in the head and far removed from reality at this point.
And the thing is, if I tied up all of my self-worth into my numbers, then I'd be fucked, because I'm not in a point in life right now where I can realistically train in a way to push those numbers up. And even if I did, like you said, even if I put in all that work and I did make a bunch of sacrifices and lost out on a lot of other aspects in life that I care about, even if I did do that, what would I do? I'd get my deadlift from 500 to 515, 525 maybe, right? It ain't going to 550, 600. That's not going to happen. My squat's not going from 435 to 475, 500. I might touch 450 maybe. So, it just, when I back up a little bit and I take a deep breath, I realize hey, I'm in this for health primarily. I'm in this to be a certain level of functional, and I just described earlier what I meant by functional. And then I'm also in it because I enjoy the process of training and figuring out how to make the weight on the bar go up, given the limitation that I give myself. And beyond that, I want to be out of the gym. I don't give a fuck. I don't want to spend any second longer than I have to in the gym. Not everybody's like that, but that's me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. I just, other than the bench, I don't have, after I hit my goals, I just checked out and I just show up, try to add. If I can't add, I stretch out the intensity, do it every 2, 3, 4 weeks, et cetera.
Right.
If I miss, I try again a month later, and I don't care, I just don't care. And it keeps going up, I keep getting stronger. But I want that 315 bench, and I get so mad about it. Then I realize that, most people don't bench 315, but I'm looking at Will Morris over here benching 405 at,
and he's like, what, 5'6", No,
he's 5'4", 180.
5'4", yeah. I mean, it's ridiculous.
He says that he's freaking jacked. He says his arms look like, what did he say, articulated penises.
That's hilarious.
He kept saying that at the seminar. He says that publicly.
Jacked.
So,
yeah, right.
Yeah. But he's fucking jacked. He benched fucking 405, man.
Yeah, it's insane.
And, there's guys that are benching in the mid 3s, but they're all bigger than me. And, maybe rips, right? If I get 220, I can pull it off. But man, even at 195, I'm struggling to get that last 5 pounds on the bench. I got 310. I can't get 315.
Right.
And, like my friend here laughs all the time. He's like, we're so far removed from reality. Most guys will never bench 300.
Yeah, that's right. So, if you're dealing with burnout in your training, this is something you got to get a handle on, is like, why are you doing this? And probably the reasons that you started aren't the reasons that you're doing this now. Because a lot of people start because they want to look better. They want stuff to stop hurting, just like you said. And there's nothing wrong with that. Those are fine goals, but those are goals that, in my experience, do not take you very far, because the limitation is not the training most of the time. It's genetics, and you're not going to look like some other person that you want to look like, because you don't have their genetics.
No.
But you find other reasons along the way, right? Like, oh, hey, I feel better when I do this. I'm capable of more things. I'm more resilient. I can go out and do a whole day of hard-ass yard work, and it doesn't trash me anymore like it used to, et cetera, et cetera. And if you go back and you figure out, like, okay, that's why I'm training, then that does steer the training, right? That makes it, you can give yourself some grace when you miss lifts, right? And you don't hit PRs because it's going to happen. And then also you can rejigger your programming as needed to address your goals. And if your goals, like, so for instance, if your goal is to be healthy, and all you've done is lift weights, but you otherwise just sit around at a desk in an air-conditioned office, or at home in your air-conditioned office, then, you should probably get out and do some other activities besides just lifting weights. Right? If health,
that's right.
If health is so when you get in touch with what you really want out of your training, then that also drives the programming too. It tells you what to do, and it you start to say, like, okay, have I met a reasonable baseline of strength for my goals? If yes, then okay, well, what else is missing? Oh, I don't do anything except for lifting weights. Okay, well, let's do some conditioning. Let's go out and do some activity. Let's make sure that you're walking a couple miles at least every day. On top of that, that's what a healthy, well-rounded person would do.
That's right.
It drives the programming. On the other hand, if you're the person, you're like, no, I just enjoy spending hours in the gym every day. I know some people like that. I'm not shitting on that, but if that's you, well, then you should probably get into something that supports that. Like, get into bodybuilding or something.
Right.
Right.
Usually burnout is the result of you spending a lot of time on things you don't want to be doing. And that could come in many ways, shapes, or forms. It could be that you're spending more days in the gym that you want to. You love working out, but now you're in there too long, too many days, doing too many sets. You need to dial something down. It could be that your training is so specific now to where it's providing you less and less value for the thing that you wanted, i.e. you're still training for strength and you want to look better, but you're just weak as shit. So it's now taking you longer than you anticipated, which was the next reason I was going to cite. A lot of people don't realize or know, a lot of us don't know how long it's going to take to achieve an outcome like that, because it's subjective, right? I want to look jacked, right? So what number is that correlated with? Well, all I could tell you is it's correlated with a heavier number than today,
Right.
More than you did today, and that could be 300, it could be 400, it could be 500, Ironically enough, when I deadlifted 500, I was perfectly satisfied with the way that my back looked, But my point is, take however long you think it's going to take and double it, because it's going to take a long time. And then when it gets to that point where you're starting to really hate what you do, then you got to go back and ask yourself, man, is this goal really that important to me?
Right.
And if it's not, that's okay. That's okay.
Yes, that's fine.
You didn't commit to pulling 550 if that's what it takes, you maybe thought in your head that 400 would do it, but yeah, it's usually the result of doing something you don't want to do repetitively for too long of a period of time, and that's not to say you should, avoid hard things. Like, I enjoy this, but it's hard as fuck, but I enjoy it. And going through that hardship is worth it for me. If it's not worth it for you, that's a different story,
Yeah, that's a good point. I enjoy the hardship, frankly. Like, I enjoy the it sounds sadistic, right? Unless you're into this stuff. I enjoy the discomfort of lifting heavy. When I don't do it, and I it's more than a few weeks of being away from training, I really feel it. I miss pushing my body hard. So that's part of it for me. And I think it has carryover into the rest of life too. Like when I push myself hard in the gym, it's easier for me to handle difficult conversations with people that I don't particularly like, that I have to get along with. It's easier to handle, just sticky social situations, making difficult decisions about finances or, logistics, whatever it is, right? It's all easier when I push my body hard in the gym. When I lose that discipline, I mentally, I take a psychological hit from it. I'm just not as sharp of a person when I'm not pushing myself in the gym.
Yeah, same. It's just worth it to me. So
yeah,
cool.
So yeah, there you go. So if you've been suffering from burnout, I have one other thing to say. I read a book a while back, and I want to revisit it. It's a good one. It's called The Unsettling of America by a guy named Wendell Berry. And it's the only thing I've read by Wendell Berry, but I know some people who are big fans of his. He is a writer. He's still alive. He's probably in his 80s now. He's an American writer that writes both nonfiction and fiction. I haven't read any of his fiction. I've heard it's very good. This particular book is a piece of nonfiction that on the surface is about American farming policies in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. It was written in the late 70s, so it was kind of looking at the effect of American farming policies on American culture. It sounds pretty dry, right? But when you get into it, what he's really talking about is, how do we get to this point where we have all these people living urban or suburban lifestyles, working in jobs very hard at things that they don't particularly enjoy and don't particularly give them much satisfaction or meaning in their life, but nevertheless that they feel that they must, that they have to, right? They feel like they're on this hamster wheel. I'm sure many of you can relate to that. That's the central question that he's really tackling in this book. And he relates it back to the loss of the generalist. And he says that, if we roll the clock back 100 years, 150 years for sure, most of us were living an agrarian lifestyle. We were farmers of some sort, right? Or we were farming adjacent. If you were a blacksmith and you made horseshoes and, farming implements or whatever, right? You were adjacent to this agriculture. And if you want to be a good farmer, you have to be a generalist. You have to know you have to know something about a lot of things. You have to understand how systems work. You have to understand the processes of nature at a macro level. You have to understand why you take care of the grass, because that informs the nutrition of the cattle that you're raising, and that makes the beef taste a certain way, and so on and so on. So you see these systems at a very large level. You're not a specialist where you know everything about this one particular species of grass that you could possibly know, and you'd know absolutely nothing about shoeing a horse. But that's what we've become in our modern economy, is that most of us are very, very specialized in one particular job, sometimes just a sub job. And we don't actually know or are capable of doing the thing that the company that we work for does as their business. We do like a particular job within the company, and that's the specialty. And this type of work is not very satisfying to most people, because you don't get any tangible work product. You don't really get to see anything come from your efforts other than I sent this email and I sent these spreadsheets off, and the reward for that is, my paycheck clears, and then you get more emails and spreadsheets to take care of. And that's a difficult thing. But why do I bring that up? I'm not just trying to be a doomer here, right? I think the gym, Rip says it in the beginning of Starting Strength, the gym is it's like proxy caveman activity. right? It returns us to some extent to a primitive physical lifestyle that we used to have. And if you can find the joy in movement, in human movement, then you can kind of start to claw some meaning back in your life. If that's you that are working in a job that's unfulfilling and that doesn't provide much meaning or value in your life, then the gym can be that for you. But you want to make sure that you're not. You don't want to put yourself. You don't want to make turn the gym into the workspace again.
That's right. I would agree with that.
So there you go. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we hammered that to high hell. So
there you go.
Let's close out, man.
Yeah. Well, tell us where to find you.
You can find me at weightsandplates.com, on Instagram at @Robert_Santana. We are now on YouTube at weights_and_plates. If you're in Metro Phoenix, you can visit me at Weights and Plates Gym. We're just south of the airport in the South Mountain neighborhood, or South Mountain Village. And, we offer one-on-one training. So if you're, coming from out of town, want to tune up, I'm here to do that for you. We have memberships as well if you're local, and have plenty of online coaching at weightsandplates.com. So yeah, that's my spiel.
There you go. Yeah. If you check the links in the show notes, there are links to all these things, and there's links to the webpage where you can see all of the coaching offerings that Dr. Santana has for you. Because it's not just online coaching, you also do online nutrition coaching. That's a separate product, right? And you also do consultations too. Like I think I sent a friend of mine to you.
You sure did.
To do a
Thank
consultation the other day. So yeah, so all of these things are there. If you're looking to kind of clear up some confusion, or get a look at your lifts, or figure out how to improve your eating habits. Well, in the meantime, you can find me if you have any questions about coaching or training. You can find me at jonesbarbellclub@gmail.com. Or if you want to follow whatever I do on Instagram, I am there at marmalade_cream. All right, we'll talk to you again in a couple of weeks.